So now we are going to invite, or I'm going to invite Dr. Patricia Kuhl to join us. She is the co-director of the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences. And I just want to say on a personal note that when I first joined this committee, I had the honor and privilege of visiting the iLabs at University of Washington. And it was incredibly eye-opening. And I hope that the presentation, no pressure, is similar without seeing it in action for all of you to really, again, understand the impact of all that brain activity going on in the littlest kids in our state. Dr. Kuhl, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation to come back. It's thrilling to be back. I was thinking today on the way down here that in the 1990s, when Ruth Kagi, hello, Ruth, what was, in the leadership position here, that we were spending so much time talking to the legislature and inviting you to come visit and see what we were doing with brain science, and making a promise to you that the investments in the brain science would pay off, because we would learn not only what works with regard to working with children to enhance their development, but why it works. And knowing why it works is critically important. So I want to say before starting, I'm so happy to see you back in your chairs. The state of Washington is thrilled that you're back in action and face-to-face, because the brain science shows how important face-to-face interaction is when compared to remote interaction. It's 100% different. Your neurons are firing. I can see it now. Anyway, so on the agenda today, what I wanted to do is to say thank you, and to say I want to deliver on the promise that the brain science is teaching us how children learn and why they learn in that way. And then to say that iLabs has always worked to take the best brain science and put that to work in the best applications that we can feed to the public. So basic science to practice is what we've been trying to achieve. And today I want to highlight 3 examples, one that has to do with parents and how they can be coached, proving that not only the parents are malleable, but children's language skills are malleable. And that goes against a lot of people's beliefs that language and other skills are set in the brain at birth, and that you've either got it or you don't, and that it doesn't make that much difference. But these data show that it makes a huge difference. So parent coaching. Then another example coming from our work on bilingualism, 40 years of research on language and the bilingual brain and the advantages in a global economy of the bilingual brain. We have a new program called Sparkling Bilingual. I have little take-homes for each of you today, just to remind you of Sparkling Bilingual. It's a teacher training and certification program to help teachers, show teachers and certify them what the best methods are for bringing about bilingualism in young children's brains. So we'll talk about that. And then something that sprung during the pandemic, we were working on a reading camp for young children at 5. 5 is a window of opportunity, a critical period for learning to read. And we had a successful reading camp going every summer at iLabs for 5-year-olds. Hits the pandemic, and one of the very bright research scientists at iLabs said, I'm pivoting this online. And of course, our studies show you've got to be social. Social is how it works, face to face. The brain is turned on. It's the gateway to learning. She says, no, I have ideas. And so I'll show you today her highly successful online reading program for 5-year-olds that, when compared to controls, boosts reading in a way that will surprise you. So we're getting email from all over the world. I want that online reading program. So just to get started, to remind you, what is iLabs dedicated to? What's our mission vision? We believe that you build the mind of the child. You build it. And the way you build it is through experiences. The brain isn't set at birth. It's set to learn. Brains come born learning. They don't come set with preordained skills that will trip off regardless of what you do. We know that because we've been doing a lot of behavioral studies, 40 years of behavioral studies, but the brain science has been the game changer. Here's a little 3-monther in the iLabs MEG machine. We'll show you this a little bit later. This gives you a movie of activity in the baby's brain on a sub-millisecond level in each of the areas as the baby experiences something. And so we can compare the brain measures the activity in the brain for kids who have had a lot of experience versus little experience and see what the difference is. So we'll tell you about that. Another kind of brain measure gives you not a movie, but a photograph of the structures in the brain. So there are areas in the brain that are specialized to see in the back of your brain, to hear over here in Broca's area, to move, to respond to people, social areas, all kinds of areas in the brain. But just like the group of you, nothing gets done unless you communicate. And so what these structural measures do is show you the connections between brain areas. Connections are where it's at these days. The areas are there, but the connections are growing. And so what is it that causes the connections to grow? And then today, what I'll show you is that we have studied combining behavioral and brain science and combining work with interventions. When you know you have a theory about what's working and why, you can actually do an intervention to see whether or not it works. So setting the stage for all of the work on language is this graph that the biologists point to all the time. There is a critical or sensitive period for language development. This is a graph that shows you how good you are at learning a second language at a particular age. And if you look at your age on this curve, you'll see, since none of us are from 0 to 7, the 0 to 7-year-olds are the geniuses in the group, and they learn automatically, implicitly. You have to just present it in the ways that I'll show you today really work. But every 2 years after the age of 7, there is a statistically significant decline in the ease. I didn't say you can't do it. The ease with which you can learn and the brain mechanisms you put to work are totally different after the age of 7. And after puberty, you're still fairly good until puberty. After puberty, it's really, really difficult. So this is sort of what sets the stage for why you get in there in the early period rather than waiting. We think these kinds of periods exist for all kinds of things in human development, potentially in the social realm, potentially in the math realm, but they haven't been studied in the way that language has been studied. We really know it's true in the area of language. And then just to give you a picture of some of the structural growth that we've seen, if you're not convinced that early is the time to work, you need to look at graphs like this. This is the growth of these connections I've been talking about. We're tracking myelin with a brand new technique. Myelin is what covers the pathways so that information along those pathways can go really rapidly. So the more myelin there is, the better that brain is it's doing its work. Look at the 7-monther brain. You're seeing it from the right side, and then you're seeing it from the top down. Look at the 11-monther, look at 26-monthers. 26-monthers' brains are really, really connected. If you've ever played with a 26-monther, almost 3, you feel like you've, died and gone to heaven. Those kids are so good. They can talk your leg off. They understand a lot about the world, and they can even fool you. They attempt to do that. They're very, very smart creatures, and this is partly why they are so smart, because they're building those brains, and these kinds of connections depend on the experiences that kids have. They are not automatic. So principle 1 is that the social brain gates learning. Now, this was a pretty radical idea when we first introduced it. People thought that social was, that's that soft stuff. That's that soft. That's, yes, we should be good to one another. Yes, we should be social. But it's not critical to learning. The academic world, what you learn academically is on this other side, left side, right side brains, that kind of talk. We now, for 10 years now, we have known that the social brain seems to be in charge. Social emotional relationships, but that social face-to-face attentiveness, that locking on to other individuals is the way it works. I'll show you that in this example. Early in development, there's a critical period between 6 and 12 months before the baby's first birthday. The baby sorts out which sounds its particular language uses. So we all know the Japanese and English use different sets of sounds. And one that's quite noticeable is that R and L are not used in Japanese, but R and L, rake, lake, and lots of other words are used in English. When we went to Japan in 2006, showed that Tokyo babies were as good as American babies at hearing the difference between R and L, ra and la, equal, both at about 65%. 2 months later, the American kids are getting a lot better. at RL, rah, rah, la, la. They can hear that difference. You can measure it with the brain. You can measure it with behavior. Japanese kids are going down, heading towards chance. What's going on during that sensitive period? So between about 8 and 10 months of age, there is a sensitive period for learning. The brain's wide open to experience. Babies are absorbing what it is that we're saying, not the words, but the sounds. There's taking statistics basically on what it is that is contained in the sounds that we're presenting to them. What we discovered is during this blue period here, this sensitive period, social interaction is absolutely critical. How did we know that? We did an experiment, brought in 9-month-old babies to the lab who had never before been exposed to a foreign language. And my Mandarin speaking graduate students and postdocs had 12 sessions with the babies between 9 and 10 and a half months. They sat on the floor and played, as you see in this picture on the left, with books and toys. And the babies were just wide-eyed watching this, Mandarin speaking Chinese student talking to them. But we didn't know what effect it would have till the experiment was over. So 12 sessions later, less than 5 hours, because it was only 25 minutes a session, we did brain and behavior measures to see what had happened to the brain. We saw that the brain's response to the sounds of Mandarin, which are not, I can't discriminate them, I can't speak Mandarin. So all of us are only able to discriminate the sounds that we were exposed to in that early period. So these babies, not before, but after their 12 sessions, responded just as well to the sounds of Chinese as their little colleagues, their peers in Taiwan and in Beijing. It was a shock. But we immediately wanted to know, well, if it works this way, why can't we just put a DVD, a beautiful, video in front of the kids and give them the experience their brains need? So we did the experiment on the right. New 32 group of new babies come in for their 12 sessions, but they're not getting it live. They're getting it, like over Zoom practically. Zoom wasn't here yet, but that's what they were getting. They were watching that video for 12 sessions. And as you can see with this little one, they crawled up to the television set, they pointed to it, they were trying to interact with it. And the graduate student said to me, Dr. Kuhl, those kids in that video group, I think they're going to do a lot better because it's so simple. There's not all the activity going on. What did we learn? No learning whatsoever in the kids exposed over a video, not at all. They were attending, they were looking at it, but nothing was going on in the learning centers of their brains. So the social brain rules. It's that social experience. It's that messy human, another baby there, mother's behind you, all that going on. The brain is specialized in tracking that information socially, just as we are as adults. You do better when you learn in person. So these ideas sent us to a request to the legislature to help us fund this $2.5 million MEG machine to find out what's going on up there in the social circumstance that's not there in non-social. So the Washington State Life Sciences Fund, we were one of the initial fundees of that initiative. Thank goodness we had this machine that we could put little babies in because it's safe, totally non-invasive, doesn't make any noise. It's a fabulous machine, and we have all the physicists and engineers to do the analyses of the data. We were first in the world. We're known as the Baby Meg people. First in the world to put little ones. We've had 2-monthers, we've had newborns in the machine because you can lay it down. But when it's sitting up, the 2-monthers and 6-monthers, this is a 3-monther, very, very happy to let us show them pictures, let them hear people, let them listen over earphones. She's listening over earphones to the sounds of many languages. And we can see what happens as she detects the ones that she is familiar with. And so we can actually begin to see what happens when you are presenting a social stimulus as opposed to a non-social stimulus. So here's what it is. When you let a child get a social language experience, not only do the auditory centers of the brain light up, but the centers of the brain that will allow the child to respond, the motor centers, even though these kids, 3 months, they cannot talk yet, but the motor centers that are going to talk are activated by a social stimulus. So when you talk to young infants, you're not only activating auditory system, you're activating what they need to do. You're getting the serve and return ready. You're getting the back and forth, the conversational turn begins as these infants are listening to you speak. And so that is an incredibly important finding.
Dr. Kuhl, can I interrupt you for one question,
go ahead.
Representative Bent?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you, Doctor. This has been a fascinating presentation, and I remember hearing from you once before. But this machine, this big machine for our little babies, to see what's going on and see how their brain is reacting. So, what kind of a radio wave are we using there? And is there any possibility of a damage to the child?
No, these are completely safe and non-invasive. What we're doing is measuring what's exuding. When we are doing anything, you can measure on the scalp with a little sensor, electrical information that's leaking from the skull. And what we're looking at in this machine is the magnetic fields that are created that you can measure with this hairdryer that looks like it's from Mars, right? It looks like a hairdryer from Mars. It's like a plastic cover over the head, but inside are squids, superconducting quantum interference devices that are measuring the amount of magnetic field change as the neurons fire and do their work. So no, it's deemed absolutely safe. It's been used since the 1980s in Europe and Japan, where these studies started. We were the first in the world to bring it to the world of babies, but yes, it's completely safe and non-invasive. That's the wonder of this kind of work. So we can see what social does to the brain. We can also understand how important this back and forth. So I'll be telling you a lot about conversational turns. One of the things that encourages infants to join the social world, to begin language, is that they want to join that social exchange, that dance that happens when two people talk to one another, when a parent and child interact. And so we began to understand the importance of the brain science for not only for other scientists, that's what we get paid to do, to teach other scientists and the government how these things work in children. How does learning work? What can we do about it? What about the people on the front lines? We began to wonder, what about parents? Why shouldn't parents understand brain science? Why shouldn't they be brought along so that they could do the kinds of things that would help their children? This is the most common experience we've all had ourselves, our children. As grandparents, we do that. We're face to face with babies all the time, and they're riveted by the sounds we make, by the sights of our faces as we interact with them. We wanted to look at what parents have to do with these changes I'm describing. So we wanted to compare the quantity of words that children heard with the quality of the language that they experienced. So we know quantity is important because Hart and Risley told us ages ago that children growing up in non-professional families, the 30 million word gap, heard so many fewer words, and the attribution was, it's the amount, it's the amount, it's the amount. We wanted to compare them because our studies were beginning to suggest it's probably not the amount, it's the quality, it's this face-to-face engagement, it's that. So we brought parents in, we started studying what is different in the parent-child interaction that might have to do with language development, and we saw this signal called motherese or parentese, fatherese. It's what we do when we're put in front of young children. So here's a laboratory study. I'm plotting the pitch here. The top is AD, adult directed. The bottom is ID, or infant directed. Basically, we're just interviewing a mom with a 2-monther sitting on her lap. And I'm talking to her and she says, I had a little bit and the doctor gave me Mendectin for it. So she's talking to me in the same way I'm speaking to you. It's not boring, but it's not what I do if I'm in front of a baby. And so she unconsciously turns to her baby and says, can you say, ah? Say, ah, hey, you, say hi, hi. She goes up to 700 hertz. I mean, you can't do this without a lot of coffee. But a baby will bring it out of you. And, we started to wonder, what in the world is that signal? And, when you played it back for parents, they're not aware that they're doing it. They are a little embarrassed. They, well, should I be doing that? Should I stop doing that to my baby? And we say, doesn't sound like it, because babies in tests of preference, if you let them turn their little heads one way or another when they're not listening to their own parents, and they get this motherese, parentese, because fathers do it too, parentese versus a tone that modulates itself, either adult directed speech or a tone that modulates just the way this does, but it doesn't sound like speech. Babies will do whatever they have to do to turn that on over and over and over again. So they like it. Is it good for them? It looks like it, because when we did the following study, we do a randomized control test. We bring in a group of families, 75 families came in, and they had just under 6-monthers. We divided them, randomly into a control and an experimental group. Each one of them had their little babies wear a Lena vest. So there's a company called Lena that makes these perfect little vests with little microphones that babies can wear 16 hours a day, as soon as they wake up and until they go to sleep. So we can record what's the auditory world of the baby really like, how much television is on, how much radio is on, how much talking are they getting, and how much parentese are they getting. So we wanted to do that measurement and then see whether it made a difference to children's language development. In the coaching study, the parents who were coached were told about brain development, told about language input, parentese, and then we would take their audio recordings and play it back and say, this is what your parentese sounds like. And when they got over the embarrassment, especially the dads, we'd say, no, this looks like it's a good thing. We didn't tell them how much to do, or we just sent them home. Here's the information. It's like giving a Fitbit to a person and saying, the studies are saying between 7,000 and 10,000 steps a day is pretty good. Then you send them home. What happens? We're all running up and down stairs at night to try to get our step count up, right? Because you've been a couch potato all day. And so we sent the parents home. What happens? They drastically increase their parentese. So top left, the control group's in blue, the experimental coaching group is in red. 6 months, 10 months, 14 months, 18 months. That's only 4 times in that period did we bring the parents back in, give them examples of their speech to the kids, tell them kind of where they are on the distribution, and send them back home. And you can see what the parents are doing. They're producing significantly more parentese. On the right, we're measuring CTs, or conversational turns. And again, right from the beginning, but that it wasn't significant at the beginning, coaching produces this extraordinarily high increase in conversational turns. And at the bottom, what's happening to the child? Child language is getting a lot better in that group. And so what we've done by coaching is change the trajectory of parent behavior and change the trajectory of child behavior and their interactions. These conversational turns take 2. And so it lasts longer than you would expect. Oh, before I get to how long it lasts, let's talk just a bit about fathers. So,
and Dr. Kuhl, real quick, a question from
go ahead.
Vice Chair Taylor.
Thank you. I really appreciate the depth of your research, and I'm curious around the selection of participants.
Yes.
And whether or not participants are compared within group dynamics. So families that are all, let's say, low income from the same zip code would be compared against each other versus families who are from higher incomes with dual parents who are in the home, married, all, like, there are studies that show that, like, fathers who are not in the household, in particular Black families, they are just as involved in the raising of their children. So we set policies that actually create actual division amongst parenting styles, and we have been historically vilifying Black moms in particular. I'm just wondering how this all comes into play, because I'm not, it's not resonating with me.
It's not. Okay.
No.
So no, that's interesting. Okay. So we, in this initial study, 2017, 2018.
And I'm not a mom. I'm just saying, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I mean, but what we've measured shows that it doesn't take being a mom to bring out this kind of speech. It'd be
Mhm.
interesting to record you. I'd love to record you. If it doesn't resonate, I'd love to know if you're producing it in front of kids or, it would be very interesting.
I think I'm feeling like Black moms in particular who may not have the capacity to do, or their parentees is not received in the same way as what the majority community
Right.
accepts as parentees.
I totally get you.
And so I know that there are a lot of very great Black moms of all economic backgrounds. And I would love to know how they are incorporated into your studies.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it's a very, very important question. And so in this initial study, we were reflecting the greater Seattle area in terms of the demographics of the participants. We had 75 families. What we noted is as the study went on, you get to 14 months, you get to 18 months, there were more people moving in the lower socioeconomic group. And so in the end, the participation in lower SES families was lower. But if you look at what they were doing up to the time they dropped out, whether it was the exact same increases in pitch didn't matter. It's a comparison of their standard speech to their child speech. And in every single case, speaking to the children slowed down the speech, increased the pitch, gave the kids more time. It's a slower, more deliberate engagement. We didn't see differences. We're now going out for studies in the lower SES group, meaning recruitment that takes into account travel time, bringing people in with taxis or whatever we have to do for their coaching appointments or going to them to make sure that we sample even more adequately what we've got. And with regard to dads, so we have documented that daddies are less chatty than moms are. They're producing about 15% of what the child hears. Dads are working more. They're spending less time with the babies. However, when they do spend time with their babies, they are doing the same kind of increases in pitch, slowing down and making it a simpler conversation about the here and now things. We don't see any blame to put on dads. And in fact, our studies are saying that paternal parentees, even though it's a small amount of what the baby hears, is predicting successful language outcomes as much as the moms. And so I find that very interesting. So dads matter. Maybe they're more powerful. Maybe when dad comes home and dad's talking, maybe that's an alert signal for babies. I mean, maybe they lock on. Who knows? I think it's intriguing that they're only 15 to 20%. They're speaking less, but when they do speak, it's powerful. They're making a difference. So thanks for that question. So now linking it to the brain. So mechanism matters. What is parentees? What is this kind of engagement with the baby? These conversational turns, what's it doing to the brain? There's a place in the brain above your left ear called the arcuate fasciculus that is critical to language and critical to reading. It connects, it's the pathway connecting you listening and speaking. And what we can see is that the more conversational turns a child heard at 6 months, engaged in at 6 months, the stronger that pathway is, the red marks on that brain, that area is being strengthened. And that turns out to be important because later that same pathway is going to be used in learning to read. Now let's get to how long the effect lasts. So we've been charting kids to 18 months, then we brought them up to 30 months, well after coaching is over. Now we just finished a 2023 publication, outcomes at age 5. So we've waited all this time. The kids are getting ready for kindergarten. They're not in kindergarten yet. The children of parents who used more of this parentees in infancy produce longer sentences. They use more diverse lexical, meaning word types, and they took more conversational turns with their parents. So you set up habits that change the brain that don't change when you stop coaching or stop watching. The parents are in a new framework. And so parents and children advance each other, and it lasts till the age of 5. I find that absolutely astounding. What do you know that lasts to the age of 5 when you had 4 coaching appointments between 6 months and 18 months? I think it's astounding. So I don't think I need to summarize it's important that we know the brain mechanism. It's important that we see this little pathway that's getting stronger in the kids whose parents have been coached. These structural connections matter. It's not just activity in certain areas, it's the communication between areas that turns out to be important.
And Dr. Kuhl, you have about 5 more minutes.
I know, I'm going to go very fast now. So all of these studies, 40 years of research on language, allows you to sort of understand what it is that it takes to teach a brain language. And so we have this movie we made, watch just a little bit of. It's how you set up a baby for MEG testing. And this is one of our little bilingual 11-monthers who's getting ready to go into the MEG machine. And so it's fun, and I can send you all of these slides and you'll have the movie for yourselves, but we probably won't take the time to go through it. We're marking the head so we know exactly when the baby's in the machine. We know exactly where her head is so we can see where the activity is happening. So in the studies on monolinguals and bilinguals, we can see by 11 months that Spanish, English exposed babies are just as good at Spanish as they are at English, and vice versa. The monolingual babies their brains respond only to English. These bilingual babies are responding to both. So we decided to go to a country, Madrid, Spain, where the kids are all in public supported, government supported, wonderful preschools, and run a language intervention. We compared 18 weeks intervention with 32 weeks intervention. These are undergraduates from the University of Washington who spent their junior year abroad. And we showed, here's another movie just illustrating what some of the principles are: to be highly social, to have the kids talk back and forth, to engage right from the beginning. Fun to watch, but the data in 1 hour a day. Here's our 18-week intervention. The red is the experimental schools kids. At each school, we had experimental and control kids. You can see that the number of English vocalizations at each of the 4 age groups was highly significant in all of the kids. And so we have now, these are our bilingual graduates in Madrid. We then moved the program to software because we were getting emails all over the world asking us, we want this sparkling software. We're now scaling. We had software programs that were used in our second round of tests in Madrid. There we went to the poorest schools in Madrid, the migrant communities that the ministry said to Ministry of Education in Madrid, who was supporting all of the tutor payments, said to us, you won't do any good there. These are the migrant children. We call them the gypsy children. They will not learn. We said, we au contraire, they will learn. What we showed in this experiment is that the migrant babies learned faster, significantly faster in the first 18 weeks. In the second 18 weeks, because we were comparing half year with whole year, they stayed above, not significantly above, but they stayed above the entire 32-week period. These kids can learn. Our programs work for kids at all socioeconomic status.
Dr. Kuhl, question, Representative Ortiz-Self.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you just answered my question. I went to the iLabs with Fernando Esteban.
Yes.
And looked at the bilingual and the sparkling program. And I received from the Minister of Education in Spain all the data from the program there that showed that socioeconomic was not a factor in any of this. And so I just wanted you to bring that out, but you just did. So thank you.
Yes. And also more is better. So the 18-week curriculum and the 36-week curriculum, so a whole year is better than a half. This is 1 hour a day. So the world is waiting for sparkling bilingual. We are ready to bring it to the world. We're scaling it up to an LMS, a scalable web-based program. We will be ready in September of 23. We're working with First 5 California to get into their bilingual schools. We're working with Oregon's dual language learners. We hope to work with Washington State. We'd have the whole left coast doing bilingual babies brought about by work done here at the University of Washington with the support of the Washington State Legislature. I'm so excited about it. Okay, I'm going to do this in a minute. This online reading camp blew us away because we had shown in 2 weeks of face-to-face that children at 5 could significantly all of the reading readiness measures that bring them ready to read. It's like a critical period in the brain. My student, Yale Weiss, decided she was going to create a beautiful Zoom experience for the kids. What you see here is kids at home holding up their blue eggs, which they're voting to indicate for the horse that they see, whether or not it uses the sound E, the sound H, or the sound R, and the blue egg is the correct one. All the kids are holding up the blue egg. These activities took place every day for 3 hours. The kids were sent a box of materials to use. Again, socioeconomic status was varied. All of the kids did tremendously well on every single measure, the red group, the experimentals versus controls, same age kids who were measured before and after, but didn't have the 2-week camp, show much less gain at that time period. All over the world, people are asking us for the online reading program. We're now comparing online versus in person, looking for that VWFA, the word, visual word form area in purple there. That blob in the brain is what builds when you learn to read. And that's what happens at age 5. We think we can bring it about. Here's brain data saying, I can connect the whole thing. I can take early language and relate that to reading readiness. I can take the brain connection and relate that to early language. And what you see is that from cradle to age 5, we can bring kids from, babbling babies to walking, talking, reasoning, reading ready kids at age 5. That's what the science is doing for us. Last slide, work in progress. We're not going to give up with just the babies. We're now measuring teens from 9 to 17, looking at the growth of prefrontal cortex. You can see in red from 9 years to 17 years how incredibly much stronger the prefrontal cortex gets, that makes decision making, makes attention, executive functions. And also you look at the bottom, females, at least in our sample so far, are exceeding the males. They're going faster in the development of prefrontal cortex. Not exactly a surprise given other data. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, and then last to remind you, iLabs has an outreach and education branch that makes lots of wonderful videos for parents and for community building strength with parents and teachers. My 3 recommendations you've already heard. I am supported, the Kuhl Lab is supported by lots of wonderful foundations and by the federal government and by the Washington State Life Sciences Fund. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kuhl. A question from Representative Couture.
Thank you, doctor. I don't know if I'll ever hit 700 hertz, but first I would just wanted to say thank you for kind of showing us the science behind how incredibly important parental interaction is in early child development. In these studies, I guess my question is, and I'm going to use a term, neurotypical. I don't know if that's, are all the kids in the studies neurotypical? And what I'm thinking of is, kids like mine who have developmental disabilities, especially I have one behind speech as well.
Exactly.
And so it might not matter.
Yes, it does matter. And what we are doing, I couldn't present them today, but we have a line of work on children at risk for autism. We have a line of work in children at risk for dyslexia. And in all of those cases, we can identify with the MEG brain science. We haven't done the connections, the MRI connection structural measures yet, but the MEG studies show clear differences at these 6 and 12-month benchmarks between the kids who are at risk for these developmental disabilities. We're really interested in that. Part of the power of the brain science is that you can get in there so early and identify markers that could potentially be the ones to tell us now's the time to act. We know some of the social differences between children who are at risk for autism. We think many of the measures that we've been taking will look different right from the beginning with children with autism. Surprise was when one parent has dyslexia, we can see it in the little tykes at 6 and 12 months. There are differences in what those brain responses look like in MEG. So the promise here extends quite widely.
I appreciate that. And also,
Representative Couture.
oh, I'm sorry. Can I have a follow-up?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'd be interested in seeing that when ready.
All right, that's good. I could send you the work that we've already published on dyslexia. I think that would end autism.
Thank you. And Representative Eslick?
Thank you, Chair San. Then my question kind of follows the same, but what about children that have experienced trauma in their life?
Yes, children in foster care would be the best example. We can see differences there too. We have a comparison study on children at age 5 who've been in the foster system compared to children age 5, matched on all dimensions that you can imagine, who have never been in foster care. We see differences even at age 5 when all children in the study have been taken out of their homes by age 2. So between 2 and 5, they've been in foster families, but the differences are still there at age 5. So what that means, and we can see it, for example, in MEG studies, if you present words to a 5-year-old, neurotypical, but I'm not saying that foster kids are not neurotypical. Kids who have never been in foster care, within 200 milliseconds, a fifth of a second, the word will light up the Wernicke's area, the auditory area. In children who have been in foster care, what lights up first is prefrontal cortex, as though they're worried, as though, what is that signal? What is that sound? Instead of there being kind of a quiet brain until it lights up here, you've got the brain active all over, but particularly prefrontal cortex. I think these kids worry about everything, even at age 5. What is that sound? And so, yeah, it's measurable, it matters. Early trauma in that first 2 years, I'm afraid it's pretty indelible in some of its effects.
Thank you
for that
so much,
question.
Dr. Kuhl, for not only your presentation today, but obviously for all of this research. And you can tell you've inspired the committee. And I know there's a number of other questions and lots of conversations and ahas up here. So thank you so much for coming
I want to
today.
thank you for the work that you do. Keep at it. We rely on you to bring us the laws and rules that we need to help the children in the state of Washington and in the entire nation. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much.